When you look around, you can't help but think that something is terribly wrong with our world. Deep down, I'm sure you feel it, or otherwise you would not be watching a series like this. Think about it. Despite all our technological and scientific advancement, despite our instant worldwide communication systems, despite access to scores of experts and geniuses, both from the past and in the present to learn from, and despite entire libraries of information at our fingertips, we are still largely suffering from confusion, depression, anxiety, boredom, addiction, disease, chronic illness, war, starvation, slavery, tyranny, and rampant corruption within our various institutions. I'm going to ask you some serious questions to set the tone for the journey that we're about to embark on. These are my own questions, and this series is my attempt to answer at least some of them. Questions like, is this all simply due to the flawed state of the human condition? Is this all random or happenstance? Or is it possible that some of our ills are purposely managed and maintained by some unknown agency that quite possibly profits, in more ways than one, off of our ignorance and ill health? Is there an energetic, psychological, or spiritual component to all of this? What is a cult, anyways? Do ancient cults still exist and operate in our world today? If so, what kind of power and influence might they have? Why are so many people sick, unmotivated, anxious, depressed, suicidal, drugged up and dumbed down? Why are there so many things that kill, maim, and even alter us from our natural state in our food, water, air, and medical treatments? Why is our overall health in such decline, despite us living in the so-called age of science? If we are truly living in an advanced society, why are we not more healthy, more happy, more loving, more aware, more connected, and more free? Why do so many of our politicians constantly lie to us? Why do we continue to put up with this level of corruption in our society and in our world? Who founded and funds the medical industrial complex? And I'll get into that later. Who owns and controls our mainstream social, news, and entertainment media? Are the numerous scientists and elites that have openly promoted the idea of human depopulation for many decades and even centuries now actually serious? And if they are, and why wouldn't they be, how do we really think they would go about achieving their desired goals? Are we heading for a great awakening or a great reset? Are we only dealing with some corrupted psychopathic humans who crave unlimited power, money, and influence? Could be. Much of what I will show you could be answered by this assertion. However, for those interested and who wish to take this inquiry a little bit further, I will also take a deeper look at the statements made by Charles Fort and many others, and cover such questions such as, given the anti-human ideology at the root of much of this cult's belief system, is this a purely human agenda? Or is there something non-human involved at the highest levels of all this, as many ancient myths, legends, scriptures from all over the world discuss? Let's just leave those questions on the back burner for now. In this series, I'll be presenting some of my own questions, and of course my research into those questions, about the current modern medical establishment and how it came to be what it is. I share this information not to make up your mind for you, but rather for you to consider and take on for yourself. Much of this you will have never heard of before. Some of it will sound familiar. I do not claim to have any final word on any of this. I will only present the best research that I've personally collected over the years and will provide you with sources to follow up on. I am not an expert on any of this. I am merely a collector of experts and information. So take some notes of the names mentioned throughout this series so that you can better inform yourself about what you're about to hear. I invite you to make these subjects your own and to make up your own mind. Because as the old saying goes, if you don't control your own mind, someone else will. So strap yourself in. It's time we learn about and explore one of the world's most ancient and most powerful cults that I refer to as the cult of the medics.
Here at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, headquarters of a worldwide organization of affiliated companies, one of the most advanced industrial health programs is focused.
All company medical activities are based upon one theory, simply this: a healthy employee is a happy employee, and a happy employee who knows his medical limitations and who is assigned to a job in keeping with his abilities to perform is an efficient employee. To assist in the health maintenance of the employee calls for a new interpretation of medicine as applied to the needs of industry. We think of it as a positive program, as an active cooperation with the employee in maintaining his capacities for a rewarding, healthy life, rather than waiting behind a desk, waiting for something to happen to the employee before we do anything. More and more the doctor in industry will spend his time keeping the fit, rather than trying to make the unfit fit. Yes, industry is rapidly changing the environment of man, but man is having trouble adapting himself satisfactorily. Let's face it, many of these new industrial developments have created new medical problems, like air pollution, water pollution, high-altitude flying, and many others. That is why this field of medicine and industry is no longer confined to the plant. Now we are concerned with medical problems involving all employed individuals. In this industry, certainly, with over 500 different occupations, with the health of so many thousands of personnel to consider. To handle this task, then, new techniques are needed, with coordination of thought and action among all those who are interested in employee welfare is most essential. Our aim is to give the same sort of service as we have here at the central office.
To the employees in, say, Hamburg, or Rio de Janeiro, or in New Jersey. And in places where employees are isolated, they must have medical supervision too.
Let's start with a good one from Michael Elner, where he said, "Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Psychiatrists destroy minds. Scientists destroy truth. Major media destroys information. Religions destroy spirituality. And governments destroy freedom. I was especially interested in his bit about how doctors destroy health, but we'll get into that later.
Mike, welcome to the show. We appreciate you being on tonight.
Thanks for the invitation, Joe.
Okay, let's talk about the rat of the week. Why is Bayer Corporation the rat of the week?
Internal documents show that after this company positively, absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factor 8. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an incurable disease.
Hold on, Mike. So hold on. So you're telling me that Bayer knew that this drug was infected with the AIDS virus. They yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas?
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit. They dropped the product in Japan, Spain, and France. By the way, Joe, government officials in France that allowed that to happen actually had to go to prison for it. In America, not one corporate executive for this company has been indicted or even criminally investigated by our Justice Department.
Why not? You're telling me that these people that dumped this AIDS-tainted blood in foreign countries who killed children have not been taken to task in the United States?
It's worse than that. The U.S. government allowed it to happen. The FDA allowed this to happen. And now the government is completely looking the other way. Thousands of innocent hemophiliacs have died from the AIDS virus. And not only they're dying, their family members are dying because they're becoming infected with the disease.
The stuff I think we're going to touch on tonight. But you have a new docu-series coming out, and people know about it, but they don't really know about the trailer. But why don't you talk to us a little bit about this docu-series that you have coming out and what it's really about?
Well, thanks for giving me a spot to talk about it. I've been talking about this for probably a year and a half on my show, and I still haven't produced it fully, and people are like, where is it? And I got to tell you, this has been... I got to say it's been about 14, 15 years in the making in terms of my awakening to what we'll just call the medical industrial complex. And I can break down the details as we go. But it's a history of medicine, modern medicine, Western medicine, scientism, what's going on right now with this whole lockdown pandemic. But a lot of people are under the impression that this is the first time they've done this kind of thing. This is a new thing. Now everybody's just realizing that they probably shouldn't be trusting their media or their government. They should be questioning everything and researching for themselves and tuning into podcasts like this so they can get this kind of info. Mm-hmm. And I've been collecting this kind of sort of information that's been on the fringes for a long time. And when I started to have some mind explosions about 2 years ago, when certain pieces of the puzzle that weren't supposed to fit together with what I'm going to roll out in this series started fitting together. And I was doing a whole bunch of shows with my colleague Michael Tessarian on Unslaved. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the Knights Templar and the history of the Templars and the chivalric orders, the secret societies, the just, you know, how the elites operate, you know, the Vatican.
Completely, and it's authentic. That's what convinced me. One of the reasons I carried on is because I knew it was coming from the highest brow people, some of them that I respect very much, and others I don't respect, but I know that for personal reasons. They didn't want their orders to be overtaken, so they wrote about it, or they leaked it, hoping, for the best. They had the Bavarian government and even the local prince who crushed the Illuminati in Bavaria wrote 24 letters or something about the Illuminati's presence and sent it to all his brethren, royal families in Europe. Those are on record. And I don't remember him saying in one of those, oh, they're all over and done with, like we do today in the 20th century. He was warning his fellow royals because watch out, they're going to try and recruit you. They're still busy. We just suppressed them here in Bavaria, one small place, right? In Germany. Yeah, well, what about the rest of Germany? What about Austro-Hungary? What about Britain? What about Russia? So the man who knew about the Illuminati never once ever wrote about them disappearing. But today, plonkers in the 20th century are going to tell you there's no such thing as Illuminati. Didn't we just mention people from the 10th century, the Knights Templars and the Hospitallers? The Knights Hospitallers, who are sitting on the United Nations today as we speak, are the oldest society in history. Older than the Templars and older than the Cistercians. The Cistercians being way back as well. The Knights Hospitallers that became the Knights of Malta are older. Don't let that confuse you when I said that they became the clerics later on. That was just in-house decisions, when the Templar wealth was handed over. But the actual fact is that the Hospitallers started before, and they were called Hospitallers because they did what? Open hospitals. Well, that to me it sends a shudder up my spine. That's not a very good thing, because these guys were mendicants. They were apothecaries. Let's see where that road would lead you. You're talking about, today's lockdown and the people behind it. Yeah, the Club of Rome, ever heard of them?
The Club of Rome is a global network of independent and renowned thinkers. The Club of Rome analyzes today's challenges facing the world, their root causes, and the possible futures in a systematic and holistic manner. The Club of Rome encourages global debate in order to set in motion actions that by the middle of the century will ensure a more secure, equitable, and prosperous world.
Who and what is the Committee of 300? Well, I've dealt with that. I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German socialist by the name of Walter Rathenau. Now, I'll give you some background of Walter Rathenau. He was the financial advisor to the Kaiser of Germany, and he was also the financial advisor to the Rothschilds, the French family Rothschild. So he must have known what he's talking about. He made an astonishing statement in 1934. He said, there is a committee of 300 men that rule the world. They are known only to each other, and nothing happens without their consent. The goals then, very simply stated, are to make the world over into a one world, new world order, dictatorship, controlled utterly and completely by this Committee of 300. They do it by dint and by virtue of their fantastic wealth and the fact that they control thousands of the top banking institutions, the political organizations, insurance companies, but their strongest arm is called the Club of Rome. Now, when I first heard of the Club of Rome in 1969, I immediately began my investigation. And as Ken told you, all of my investigations have been done on location. Every one of them. The Club of Rome is one of the most insidious, baneful organizations in existence today, which has done intolerable, immeasurable harm to the United States of America. This Committee of 300 told a man called Aurelio Pecci to form this Club of Rome with the main object of bringing down the industries and the agricultural development of the United States. He immediately wrote a paper in which he said there are too many people on the earth, and that the United States, with its industrial development, its agricultural development, is responsible for this curse of overpopulation. And he picked up the documentation for his work from Lord Bertrand Russell, a senior statesman of the Committee of 300. And Lord Bertrand Russell had written a work called The Impact of Science on Society. And if you can ever secure a copy of that book, which I doubt you'll be able to get, you will see in there that he said the world is grossly overpopulated and we have to get rid of at least half of the world's population, and it doesn't matter how we do it. So the Club of Rome was instituted and organized to start an attack on the world's population using the United States as the whipping boy. And they came up with a paper called the Zero Growth Post-Industrial Plan for Industry and Agriculture for the United States of America. 3 days after that plan was accepted as official United States policy by James Earl Carter, I was able to, through my intelligence people, get a copy of this insidious document. Basically what it said was that the middle class in the United States of America had to be destroyed, because in the coming push to a world order, the middle class would be the stumbling block, because history had shown that the peasant class in ancient days, when they had revolted, were just easily crushed. There was no resistance. But now had grown a new super class of people in the United States called the middle class, who had long-term employment, who had job security, who were well paid, who could afford to buy the products that were made by the United States and didn't need to buy products from China or anywhere else. And the Club of Rome post-industrial zero-growth paper said this has got to stop. We have to bring down the middle class of the United States. And the way that we will do this, the way that we will accomplish this task, is by crushing their industries. The point I'm trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, is that the federal government, the secret upper-level parallel government that runs the United States, does not want you to know that you have an upper-level parallel government that calls the shots, that dictates what is going to happen to your life and mine.
Insights right there with you. I've noticed the same thing. I started comparing the whole, I compared it to, I did a show a while back. I don't even know if it's still up anywhere. I think it's on my Podbean. It's on Podbean or iTunes. It's called Masquerade. And I did it during the summer, and I compared this obsession over masking with the tradition of the masquerade, and that it's almost as if we're being brought into a mass ritual. And because the reason I talk in that language of the cults, the rituals, is because that's actually how a lot of these secret societies and elites and whatever, that's how they think. And also you can see it. You can see that they know what works on the human being. They don't need to rewrite anything. They just have to reinvent things.
Oh, yeah.
So what they do, as you said, guilt and shame, that's what corrupted the best parts of religion, which maybe in their original intention weren't meant like that, but they got corrupted over time and, all that. And it building in this mechanism of you're a dirty sinner, and the only way to achieve any kind of grace and in virtue is by self-sacrifice, immolation, and almost a borderline self-hatred. And the world is a dark place, so I'll just try to do my best until the afterlife. And then it's interesting when you take that schemata and you put it on top of this doctrine we're all being handed, which are, there's the slogans, you got all these certain slogans that we keep hearing over and over again. You have the, if you want to cross the boundary into Target or Walmart, which you shouldn't be shopping at anyways right now. Right. If you want to cross in, you have to do the blessing of the Holy Eucharist, of the hand sanitizer, and the approval of the right religious garb of covering your head to, in a lot of religions they do that, and covering of your face. And talking about slavery, the number one symbol of slaves
Yeah.
It was the mark of a slave was muzzling them.
Mm-hmm.
So I went, if you put all those components together, and also what's another thing they do in, Guantanamo Bay and, through torture experiments and things like that, they isolate prisoners. They torture them through sounds, through that just start to drive you mad. There's just so many elements of what we're seeing that's embedded in some of these horrific practices that are around torture, slavery, etc. And so there are so many elements within what we've just been handed as a solution to a virus, apparently, that is actually building a global cult.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the ingredients of a cult, they're all there. I started with the cults like, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, Charles Manson, all these LA cults, freaky cults that kind of popped out of there. And then, the Process Church of the Final Judgment, the Order of the Solar Temple, which had a lot of solar Templar symbolism with it. Mm-hmm. And they're cults of death. They actually bring people in and they indoctrinate them through, they blind them with the light, and then eventually it ends up in either ritual suicide or murder, or you have to do something for the cult. And I went from there, and then I evolved it into, ancient cults, the cult of Aton, the cult of Set, the cult of Dionysus, the whole ancient world was all formed by cults. And then ask the question, did any of those cults go away? Are they still just as prevalent today behind the scenes as our religions are? Religion didn't go away. And then I went to the next level of political cults. Are there political? You look at Pol Pot and Stalinist Russia and Nazi Germany with the Thule Society, obsession with the occult. Even Idi Amin in Africa, he was a sorcerer. He was somebody that was very much into ritual voodoo and magic and things like that. And the connections between a lot of these individuals and other cults. It's such an interesting series. More specific for that cult definition for people. I've got a few quotes that I keep close to me that just help to isolate or to expose that, because people need to see it. And when you see the blueprint, you look around the world now with fresh eyes and you go, oh, right, yeah, it is what he says. So let's just go through it real quick. So I got this one. It's from R.J. Intandola, and he wrote just really quickly what a cult is. And he said, the cult thrives on maintaining strict, harmonious beliefs in attitude, opinions, and behavior. Discord and dissonance are averted at all costs to maintain a false dogma. Truth propels the group deeper into pseudo-beliefs, and truth-telling is defamed. The result is cognitive dissonance. And there's so much you can pull out of that one.
Yeah.
And then I have another one here from Louis Joyland West, who says, the cult is defined as a group or movement exhibiting a great or excessive devotion or dedication to some person, idea, or thing, and employing unethically manipulative techniques of persuasion and control, i.e. isolation, and from former friends and family, debilitation, the use of special methods to heighten suggestibility and subservience, powerful group pressure. Cha-ching.
We need to make sure that everybody continues to let us know where those folks are. If you've observed recurring violations of the Safer at Home order, please continue to let us know at coronavirus.lacity.org/business violation. You know the old expression about snitches? Well, in this case, snitches get rewards. We want to thank you for turning folks in and making sure we are all safe.
Information management, hello, fact checkers, suspension of individuality or critical judgment, the promotion of total dependency on the group, and a fear of leaving it. And this is designed to advance the goals of the group's leaders or ideals to the actual possible detriment of members, their families, or their community. And then I'll knock it out of the park with Aldous Huxley really quickly, where he says, the nature of psychological compulsion is such that those who act under constraint remain under the impression that they are acting under their own initiative. The victim of mind manipulation does not know that he is the victim. To him, the walls of his prison are invisible, and he believes himself to be free. That he is free is apparent only to other people. His servitude is strictly objective.
Meanwhile, let's get...
My name is Marcia Angel. I'm senior lecturer in social medicine at Harvard Medical School. I joined the editorial staff of the New England Journal of Medicine in 1979, rose through the ranks, became executive editor in 1988, and then editor-in-chief in 1999, and served in that capacity for a year, stepped down in June of 2000. I was at the Journal for 21 years. So it would be very hard for me to select particular scientific contributions that changed everything overnight, although I'm sure there were some. As just one example of getting what it pays for, look at the Medicare drug benefit. In 2003, Congress passed a Medicare prescription drug benefit that would partially subsidize prescription drugs for seniors. It contained an extraordinary provision. Medicare, in that bill, was expressly prohibited from using its purchasing power to negotiate prices or to set up formularies of the best drugs. It had to pay, said the bill, whatever the companies or the private middlemen chose to charge. The person most responsible for pushing this peculiar bill through Congress was Representative Billy Towson, chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Shortly after its passage, he retired from Congress, and shortly after that was rewarded by being named CEO of PhRMA, the Pharmaceutical Industries Trade Association, at a salary of $2 million a year. When Barack Obama was running for president, he expressed outrage over this deal and promised to try to overturn the provision that prevented Medicare from negotiating drug prices. But now look what's happened. All talk of overturning that provision has stopped. And recently it was revealed that the president and his new friend, Billy Towson, had reached a deal of their own. Several analyses have shown that the innovative research was not done in the companies that sell the drugs, the early discoveries, but in NIH-funded laboratories, mainly in universities and at the NIH itself. The drug companies license many of their drugs from universities or from startup biotech companies. The NIH, publicly funded research, gives rise to the early discoveries, and then at some point in the development process, it's handed off to the drug companies. They license it in, and they continue the development. They pay for the clinical trials, which they certainly do, and then they manufacture the drugs and distribute the drugs. So what's wrong with that sequence of events? Well, the problem is that these companies expect to be rewarded as though they were the source of innovation, and they're not. And we get to pay twice. The research is taxpayer financed, the NIH is publicly funded, and then we get to pay at the drugstore. We know that the pharmaceutical industry has the largest lobby in Washington. They give generously to political campaigns. So on the left here, we can see that that's probably a part that comes out of their marketing budget, political contributions, front groups, patient advocacy groups, political policy groups. They set up a lot of what's called astroturf groups. These are groups that are supposed to look like grassroots organizations, but they're really front groups for the industry. They give gifts to institutions and community and cultural organizations. If you look at the donors to Harvard Medical School, for example, in the Dean's report of gifts to Harvard Medical School, you find right up in the top few donors some of the major pharmaceutical companies. But that's a lot of money, but it's not $55 billion. Where does the $55 billion go? Well, I think it goes mainly here, into the education of doctors. Drug companies pay for most continuing medical education, which doctors have to get in order to keep their licenses, their state licenses. They pay for most of that. They sponsor most of the big professional societies. They subsidize their meetings. They pay for other medical conferences, educational materials, gifts, meals, junkets. No doctor has to pay for any of his own meals if he doesn't want to. In fact, everywhere two doctors are gathered together, so too is the pharmaceutical industry.
So I am absolutely thrilled to have this conversation. I wondered if you will, Denny, if you could share a little bit about your background, because this is where people come in and they go, oh, well, my scientist says it's this way and your scientist says, and I'm just like, look, just let people know your background, and then we got a lot of questions to go through with you, my friend.
Okay. I'm also a claimant in a large constitutional lawsuit in Ontario that's run by the lawyer Rocco Galati. So I'm a claimant in that as well, on top of everything else. Yeah, I was a full professor with tenure at a major Canadian university for over 20 years. I was regularly an invited keynote speaker at international scientific conferences. I have published over 100 articles in leading scientific journals on many areas, including environmental science, soil science, physics, theoretical physics, and so on. So I'm a very multidisciplinary person. I was one of the most funded researchers in my faculty for a good while there. And now I'm a researcher, which is a volunteer position at the Ontario Civil Liberties Association. So I've done many things.
BC's new mask mandate requiring face coverings for indoor public spaces is being praised by those who have spent months calling on the provincial government to start ordering people to wear masks instead of just asking them to. Mask advocates are relieved.
The first thing that drew my attention was this nonsense about masks, because I couldn't believe that all of a sudden our own governments and health officials were saying that masks were a good idea in the face of decades of high quality science that finds absolutely no measurable benefit to wearing a mask. So that floored me. So I immediately wrote a paper about that and reviewed that quality, that policy grade science, and showed that you had to conclude that this was not a good idea, that there was no measurable benefit from wearing a mask. And that paper got me into trouble in a sense. It became viral. It was on ResearchGate. It became viral. It got over 400,000 reads on ResearchGate. And for the first time that I know of, ResearchGate deplatformed a scientific paper. They just took it down. I had to interact with them, find out what was going on. They ended up admitting that they took it down because it was getting too many reads.
Too many?
It was having too many reads. It was having too much influence from varied sources, and they were concerned because it was not aligned with the World Health Organization, so they took it down. And I've got all that on record. I've published that on archive.org, the exchange of emails and so on. It's just crazy. We're in a crazy time. It's never been so obvious that science is controlled, manipulated, censored, deplatformed, that the editorial boards and the peer review process, that there's a lot of corruption and there's a lot of alignment with powerful special interests. It's never been so obvious that is the case. It's really stunning to see the degree to which that is now apparent, where you have the Lancet having to withdraw these garbage papers that were basically scientific propaganda, and having to admit that they never should have been published. It's just never been so obvious. And in a sense, that's a good thing, because, science is far from this pure discipline that is based on knowledge. It has always been very political, especially since in the post-Second World War period, when they started introducing peer review. Peer review was never part of science before. In fact, Einstein submitted a paper to Physical Review, the main physics journal in the US, after he immigrated to the US, and he was shocked to see that they had sent it out to be peer reviewed, and he withdrew his paper and said he would never submit there again, and he didn't. Peer review, you have to understand, is this secret process. You're not told who the reviewers are, and the reviewers are in cahoots with the editor. Like they're saying things about you that you don't necessarily know. There's no transparency necessarily. They only show you what they want to, and they decide on that basis whether or not to publish the paper. So the peer reviewers are your competitors. They're your opponents. They're the people who have different ideas and so on. So you can imagine the potential for bias in a system like that. And it's been criticized by historians of science very severely and so on. It was actually explicitly brought in to self-control science so that you wouldn't get these challenges to what the establishment wanted.
But I do think, first of all, that there are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. And I also think that there are a number of technological devices which anybody who wishes to use can use to accelerate this process of going away from freedom, of imposing control.
Now, a quick disclaimer. I am not here to accuse all doctors or medical professionals of being involved in a massive death cult or a pharmaceutical conspiracy. To the contrary, most, no doubt, are good people that are just stuck in a corrupt and compartmentalized system. It is well known and admitted by most people I speak with that if you need emergency surgery, or you need to mend a broken limb, or need access to life-saving technology or expertise, Western medicine is second to none. Overall health advice, though, is a very different matter. And as I shall show you, there is indeed a very dark side to modern medicine and to the world of mainstream science in general that many are not aware of, we're not permitted to discuss, and few even know exist. And this must be exposed and discussed if we are to move forward in achieving optimal health as a society. It is only by going to the root causes of a problem that a viable solution can ever be revealed. I will also show you that this corruption of our health field and our politics around health and our major scientific institutions did not simply start out of nowhere in modern times. The root of this corruption goes back deep into our history. We have only just begun this journey. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where I'll be exploring the secret history of this mysterious cult of power, and how this modern medical industrial complex became what it is today. Are you ready?